Joe Manchin just came forward with some legislation with Senator Risch from Idaho on just completely putting a national imperative around nuclear energy, both here and abroad. If you're thinking you might have missed, you're probably only in the second inning here of a baseball game.
What's up, everybody? Michael Silva here. In today's video, I'm interviewing Scott Melbye, a 36-year veteran of the nuclear energy industry. Scott serves as an executive vice president of Uranium Inventory Corp, which is a U.S. mining and exploration company, and chief executive officer for Uranium Royalty Corp, the first and only pure-play uranium royalty and streaming company in the uranium industry. Let's get into it. All right, everybody, welcome to the show. Excited to talk about uranium. Before we do, a quick fun fact about nuclear energy. One uranium pellet contains the same amount of energy as 120 gallons of oil or 17,000 cubic feet of natural gas. That's powerful, pretty powerful. Today we have Scott on, and Scott is going to really dive into the uranium industry. Scott, I'm a technical trader, and as a technical trader or visual investor, I like to apply some sort of a macro look to things. So I really want to get the macro view and whether or not this is a trend taking place in uranium or if it's a fad. Now, from my understanding, there's a couple of things that take place when we see a trend really start to manifest. And those three things are social significance, economic significance, and political significance. So I want to give the floor to you and kind of walk us through what you're seeing as an insider to this industry. And then I want to talk about where your company, Uranium Royalty Corp, fits into this for investors.
Well, sure, Michael. And it's great to be with your viewers today. And you pretty much touched on all the drivers of the uranium and nuclear energy story right now. If you looked at just the commodity of uranium, which is the fuel for nuclear power, which produces about 20% of our electricity. It's over 55% of our carbon-free energy. Uranium is the raw material for that. If you looked at soberly looked at the supply and demand fundamentals of uranium over the past several years, you would be extremely encouraged by what's happening, where we've seen strong demand for the product in nuclear energy growth. But uranium production lagging well below what we're consuming globally each year. And that's because we went through a very difficult and prolonged bear market in uranium following Fukushima. The good news today is that not only do we have these supply and demand fundamentals pushing the uranium story upward, but you've got these mega trends. And it's really the whole issue of energy, how we get our energy, how clean are our various energy sources. And whether you're someone from the left side of the political spectrum, where carbon emissions is the most important thing in energy, or if you fall on the right and it's more about the affordable availability of energy, we're finding a perfect place right in the middle of those arguments because we address both. Nuclear is as clean and safe as wind and solar, but it runs 95% of the time. As opposed to 30% for intermittent wind and solar. So we're really seeing, it's not surprising, we're seeing bipartisan support for nuclear energy here in the United States, around the world, and really beginning to see the growth in nuclear power plants. We've seen 62 large nuclear power plants come online in the last 8 years, and another 54 under construction. And now we're beginning to see the first wave of the small modular and advanced reactors like Bill Gates' Natrium reactor going into Wyoming. So a wonderful story, but it's going to require a lot of uranium. And we've been producing uranium globally at 60 million pounds a year less than what we've been consuming. We use about 200 million pounds a year to fuel all 440 reactors around the world. And we've been basically producing far less than that. So we've been drawing on global inventories, which were built up during Fukushima, but now are seeing a very significant drawdown on that. So the megatrend towards clean energy is fueling this. You've had some big speculative interest come into the space in the form of Sprott Physical Uranium Trust, which has raised $1.3 billion since last August to buy physical uranium off the market. And now we have the very real circumstances around Russia and Ukraine. We, in the United States, the great story that we use a lot of nuclear power here, but we're getting a lot of that fuel for that nuclear power from Russia, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan. About 50% of what we use is imported from those countries. So there's a huge movement afoot in the European Union and hopefully in the United States, where we start thinking more about American and just energy independence in general, whether it's Europe or the United States, and producing more of these strategic goods and minerals at home rather than rely on countries like Russia and China. So all of this is really pointing to a really strong and sustained bull market for uranium. We've seen the uranium price really rally. Uranium equities are rallying. So it's a very exciting time to talk about nuclear power and uranium.
Are you seeing the tide shift a little bit as far as the social significance goes? There was always, uranium was looked at as dangerous and kind of frowned upon, I guess. Are you starting to see that shift a little bit?
No, it clearly is. It's always been something, and I think the industry could have always done a better job of educating people. But, the nuclear energy, the commercial peaceful uses of nuclear energy to make electricity, really came out of the weapons programs of the 1940s. And so there's always that inextricable connection between that and today. But the reality is, over the last 50, 60 years, nuclear energy has been the safest form of energy, even equivalent or even safer than wind and solar, if you can imagine that. But that's the reality. The avoided carbon emissions and all the health impacts that you get from that, really, it's not surprising people are giving nuclear another look. And it's a time where we're really struggling with how to get our energy. I mean, if we make this green energy transition, but we do it poorly and we do it recklessly, you're going to end up like Germany, which moved away from nuclear power, embraced to the tune of hundreds of billions of euros into wind and solar. And all they've achieved is a 50% higher electricity prices than neighboring France. That is almost all nuclear. They've made really no dent in carbon emissions. They're burning lignite coal out of the eastern parts of Germany, and the dangerous reliance on Russian gas, which has really conflicted them in the whole Ukraine conflict. So I think as a society, we're having to figure out, we can't just conserve our way out of this problem. Economies grow on energy. There's never been an economy in the history of mankind that hasn't grown without corresponding growth in energy. And, developing countries, India, China, are just wanting a fraction of the quality of life, standard of living that we have in the developed world. And that's going to require a lot of energy. And we've got to help them get that energy in a clean way, or we're going to have real serious issues in terms of the environment there and elsewhere.
Uranium, from what I've seen and not just uranium stocks, but a lot of precious metal stocks too, comes with, for investors, a lot of volatility. So you'll see a lot of big swings up and down during potentially the start of a new trend here. From my understanding, are you leaning towards this is the start of a trend? And if so, maybe from, A to Z, where do we, where are we in that trend maybe?
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that helps is uranium is a commodity, but it's not as efficient or established commodity like silver, copper, gold, which has high liquidity, very efficient markets. When price signals emerge in the market, production is taken offline or comes online almost real time in those mature commodities. In ours, we tend to have really the extremes where we can have uranium prices below global production costs for years at a time, but then we can really go far beyond what the economic clearing price of uranium is when things swing to undersupplied market. And so for investors, that actually presents outsized returns, because one might say that the equilibrium price for uranium that would satisfy producers and consumers may be $65 a pound, but we have long periods of time where we're at $20 or $30 a pound, and we go to over $130 a pound. So the uranium equities that are reacting to that can be quite volatile. And so, but with that are also some outsized returns with that risk reward in play.
Let's now kind of take the floor and talk more about how your company, Uranium Royalty Corp, fits into this picture. Before we hop into the company specifically, can you walk us through what royalty investing is?
Yes. So I've been very fortunate to be in the industry now 37 years, and all of it in nuclear energy and uranium, largely on the mining side with some of the largest uranium mining companies in the world, including Cameco out of Canada, Uranium One, which is now owned by the Russians, and Kazatomprom out of Kazakhstan, which is now the world's largest producer. But one thing that I saw and the co-founders saw in the uranium market is we failed to have royalty and streaming companies, which have become such a big thing in base and precious metals. These would be companies like Franco-Nevada, Wheaton Precious Metals, Sandstorm Royal Gold. And these are companies that don't invest in the mines themselves or operate the mines or have the big workforce, G&A overhead, landholding costs. They just invest in the success of those mines and mine developments through royalties. So for example, we could put an investment into a developing uranium mine. We could put $50 million investment to get that mine into production. And in exchange for that, the developer and miner will give us a 1, 2, 3% royalty interest on every pound of uranium produced, the economic value of that pound produced, down the road. A royalty is a financial payment in that situation. A stream is more of a physical uranium arrangement where we could end up with the physical uranium product, which is something we're quite familiar with, having holding physical uranium in our company in licensed accounts in Canada. So it's a way for investors to not only take an interest in the uranium story, but it's also a diversified investment because you're not investing in one mine in one country and putting all your eggs in that basket. You're investing in a portfolio of 15 different royalties that we've gone out and done our due diligence, and with our decades long experience in mining uranium, developing, permitting, licensing, we go out and we align with the better companies in the world today, and we put them in the portfolio. So it's a bit of an ETF approach, but it's also has other advantages. We're usually a top-line beneficiary. Our royalties are based off of revenue, although we do have some that are net profit interest, so there we do share in the profit loss of the company. But in a revenue royalty, we're taking off the top. So, if inflationary impacts affect the cost of production, as long as those pounds are produced, we get paid at the agreed royalty rate. So we just pass that exposure on all these projects to investors and allow them to have a real aligned pure play in the uranium story, and a very international one as well, because we're active in the United States, Canada, we've got royalty in Africa. We're actively looking all over the world today to add to those royalties, and it is very much a growth structure. We're not content with just the portfolio that we have today, but it's very much a view to a growth platform to really grow exponentially. We're about a $500 million company today. If we're not a $1 billion company in 2 or 3 years, we're not executing on our plans. So perfect timing. Uranium industry has not seen a lot of investment in new mines because of the low uranium prices, but now suddenly with prices increasing and reactors being built around the world, we probably need 8 to 10 decent-sized uranium mines coming online around the world in the next, in the second half of this decade. And so we're a form of project finance for those projects through royalties and streams. Their alternatives would be raising equity or issuing debt, and all of those have some pros and cons to them, but the royalty can be quite a low-cost way to finance a mine into production.
You mentioned uranium inventory, and I had read that you are currently expanded on that 1.34 million pounds. What is the plan with the stored uranium?
Yeah, so as a new company in an industry where we haven't seen a lot of mine development, and frankly, even a lot of the best mines around the world, like Cameco's Cigar Lake and McArthur River mines in Saskatchewan, Canada, have been shut in because of the low uranium prices. So in a period where we're going to grow into these cash flows going forward, we wanted to reward the early shareholders with exposure to uranium at almost the bottom of the cycle. So very early on, we were a foundational shareholder in a company out of the London exchange called Yellowcake PLC. They just buy and warehouse uranium on behalf of investors and allow you to have a pure commodity investment. Sprott Physical Uranium Trust would be the equivalent here in North America. But we bought into that because it allows us to buy basically uranium at $21 a pound through our, at the time, 10% shareholding in that company, and we're now at 60, $63, $64 a pound today. So that was the first step, but then that also gave us rights to buy uranium under their contract with the world's largest producer, Kazatomprom, out of Kazakhstan. We exercised on that early last year, about 350,000 pounds. And since that time, we've been in the open market buying physical uranium. We're up over 1.5 million pounds of uranium today at an average cost of $42 a pound. So we've already realized a wonderful mark-to-market gain on that. And that's just adds to the exposure, for investors. So you're really getting pure uranium exposure through the physical uranium holdings and the royalties and streams that we're entering into.
On your balance sheet, it stated that you have 20 million in cash with virtually no debt. Is there plans on how you're utilizing that cash?
Yeah, so we have, if you take our marketable securities and physical holdings and cash, it's closer to 131 million on the balance sheet. So we have quite a capability to go out and acquire things. If it's if there is a major investment, there's a possibility to do a private placement, or we go into the ATM facility to raise. But what's important is, in a company like ours that has virtually no overhead or G&A, and we ran the company for $1 million last year, all the money raised goes specifically, use of proceeds goes to accretive acquisitions that then grows the size of the portfolio, causes the company hopefully to be re-rated and just grow in that fashion. So until we get to a point where, we are self-sufficient from existing cash flows and, plowing them back into new acquisitions. That's how we'll grow in these early stages. But we're very well cashed up as we sit today.
What should investors be looking forward to in 2022 for Uranium Royalty Corp?
Yeah, so last year was really a great year. We added some marquee royalties in the two best mines in the world in Saskatchewan, Canada, with McArthur River, Cigar Lake. We added to the physical holdings. We added a royalty on a very promising new mine. It's an existing mine that is looking to restart development in Wyoming at the Lance project with Peninsula Resources. We added that just recently, but that's the kind of catalyst we want to provide in the coming 12 months is, we've probably got 6 active files open right now of varying sizes, anywhere from $2 to $100 million opportunities in front of us. So we want to keep adding royalties to the portfolio, grow the business that way. But also you're going to see a lot in terms of this development with Russia and Ukraine. Unfortunately, the events there have really caused the world to really kind of rethink where we source critical minerals, strategic minerals like uranium. The European community, the United States are all kind of rethinking of the idea of sourcing from places like China and Russia. So that's going to require a huge ramping up in the Western industries, and that means in the United States, Canada, Australia, Africa, where we can be investing in those mines that help meet this gap. So prospects for uranium prices continue to be very, very, very positive, favorable outlook there, as there is some immediate sort of supply shocks to whether it's voluntary bans, if you will, or voluntary resistance to not buy Russian uranium going forward, or it's a more explicit embargo ban either coming from Russia into the EU and the United States, or the United States and the EU banning Putin's exports of uranium to the West. We're really going to see a price reaction until we can get a lot of these new mines up and running to help moderate prices, but we're still a long ways from that. So if you're thinking you might have missed, you're probably only in the second inning here of a baseball game. So yes, there's been wonderful price appreciation in the spot price and in the uranium equities. But I think if you look at the bigger picture, we're only in the early stages.
I don't want to take up any more of your time here. Can you please tell us where investors can go to learn more or just find out more about Uranium Royalty Corp or any resources around uranium as well?
Sure. So we're traded in the Toronto Stock Exchange as URC is the ticker symbol in the United States. We're on the NASDAQ. We listed about this time last year on the NASDAQ as UROY, UROY. Really quadrupled at least our trading volumes and has really gotten us a lot more kind of visibility in business media here in the United States. But our website is uraniumroyalty.com. Lots of information on there. If you're interested in nuclear energy, we'd encourage you to go to the World Nuclear Association website or the Nuclear Energy Institute here in the United States. So again, very exciting times for nuclear and uranium. And Uranium Royalty Corp is an excellent pure play, diversified way to play the uranium story right now.
Thank you so much, Scott, for coming in.
All right. Thank you very much.